Greetings and welcome to One Idea. My name is Scott Kinney with Discovery Education, and today my special guest is Bill Treasurer. So, Bill, welcome to One Idea.
Hi, Scott. Good to be with you.
Find Bill today in traveling. He's in Chicago. Bill is the Chief Encouragement Officer of Giant Leap Consulting. So that's your own company that you founded, and has been a consultant with some of the biggest firms in the world, like Accenture. Has also recently written a book called Leaders Open Doors. And I thought finding out a little bit about, I read a little bit about you, Bill, in preparation for today. Could you tell, how did you come about that title of that book?
Well, it's an interesting story, and it relates to education as well. For the last 20 years, the last 2 decades, I've been dedicated to the design, delivery, and development of leadership development programs for emerging and experienced leaders. I did my thesis on leadership. I've written 3 other books. I've traveled all around the world working with major corporations in the area of leadership development. So I felt like I knew a lot about leadership. And one day, my son came home from school, and my wife said, "Hey, honey, Ian got to be the class leader today." Now, this was in preschool, and he got to be the class leader. And I thought, my son, I'm the one who goes all around the world teaching leadership. Come here. Of course, my son is the class leader. Come here, son. I said, "Ian, that's so cool. What'd you get to do as class leader?" And what he said, 7 words that I did not expect. And he looked at me with his innocent 5-year-old eyes, and he said, "I got to open doors for people." And I thought, wow, I didn't expect it, and it sort of cut right to the chase of what leadership really should be all about. And I thought about the leaders that had impacted me over the course of my career. And there were always people who had taken an interest in me, who gave me a shot when nobody else did, who helped me live up to and into my potential, and who helped me believe in myself. And maybe they believed in me more than I did until I started to believe in myself. So I turned it into a book, Leaders Open Doors.
That's fantastic. I love that story. Now, so, Bill, in your position now, you do strategic planning for some of the biggest institutions and most well-known institutions in the world, like MIT, Harvard. And you talked a little bit about courage building. So that kind of struck me, because when I think of courage, I always go back to my Wizard of Oz days and think of the lion. So what does that mean in kind of the context of education in your consulting work, courage building?
Right. So the mission of Giant Leap Consulting is to help people and organizations be more courageous. And it actually goes back to Aristotle. He said that courage is a virtue. He says not just a virtue, it's the first virtue, because it makes all the other virtues possible. And when you think about it, many ideas tied to the idea of courage, like to be a leader means to render bold decisions, and some people are going to disagree with that, and that takes courage. To be an innovator means to draw outside of the lines, to experiment, to risk take, to make some mistakes. And the greatest innovations almost always start out as blasphemy. To be an innovator means to be a blasphemer, and that takes courage. And yet, in the workplace and in schools, we teach things like assertiveness and how to handle and manage conflict and how to give good presentation skills and such. And all of those connect to courage too. We never teach people how to be more courageous. So my business is dedicated to helping people and organizations be more courageous with courage building.
Now, if I'm a superintendent of a school system and I'm responsible for a number of folks who are employed by our school system, do you primarily in your work with that chief executive officer, that superintendent, or do you primarily work with them to help others kind of inspire that courage through others?
We come in wherever they want us to come in. So we work oftentimes with senior executives, but most often they're wanting us to come in and work with the middle executive rank, sort of a manager rank, if you will. But we also work with folks right on the front line because think of the idea of courage. It's needed really by everybody. And we think that courage is a teachable and learnable skill. You've been learning how to be courageous since your mom or your dad took off your little training wheels and pushed you forward. It was one of your first experiences of courage. And the need for courage doesn't stop there. Think of the idea of bullying. When you confront the schoolyard bully, you just fast forward later on in life, and you're bound to meet other bullies in the workplace or outside of the workplace. You may have your first experience when you're 10 or 12 years old, but the need to confront that bully emerges over and over again throughout your life. So courage doesn't stop when you're a kid. The need for it continues right up until the point you probably, while you're going through the death experience, it's a courageous act as well. So courage is a teachable, learnable skill. And I think that we need to spend more time focused on helping people become more courageous instead of putting fear inside of them, which I would call in fearing, to spend a lot of time encouraging them by putting courage inside of them.
Now, why is it so? It seems like common sense, but I'll ask the question: why is it so much better? I mean, you certainly have leaders who might dictate circumstances or kind of manage that circumstance. Why is kind of managing through courage a different tactic, and why is it better in your eyes?
Well, finally, we've just started to come out with some research that has been looked at over the last about 4 years about the debilitating impact of fear on performance. Now, fear has some short-term positive impact. You probably maybe as a parent have put fear inside of one of your children to make them stop doing something, and it may make sense at certain points in their life and for short term. But over the long term, people with fear-provoking bosses are twice as likely to be late. They're twice as likely to take sick days. They're 3 times more likely to suffer from sleep disorders, and we know sleep deprivation impacts job performance very negatively. And they're twice as likely to be depressed, and high depression impacts jobs negatively. So it's a better proposition for the long term to be putting courage inside of people instead of fear. And too many leaders, Scott, talk about what keeps them awake at night. Like, well, what keeps me awake at night is that we're not getting enough funding for next year. What keeps me awake at night is we're having to do more with less in the classroom. What keeps me awake at night is, but people don't want to know what keeps you awake at night. That's just the transmission of anxiety. It's trying to get people to be as afraid as you are, and then you can sleep better. The reality is that people want to know what gets you up in the morning. What gives you confidence? What is the opportunity on the future that we should be moving towards that should excite us? So let's talk about what gets us up in the morning instead of what keeps us awake at night.
So we started with your son and kind of his inspiration of your book. Is there some sort of application, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, between teacher and student in this kind of the building courage? What should we be doing with our students to build courage, and how might that impact their lives?
So it's a good question. And I think that part of being a good teacher, part of being a good leader, means to nudge people into discomfort. And that means your job is to sometimes make people uncomfortable, not in a fear-provoking way. As I just showed you, I'm not all about that kind of leadership, but in a way that nudges them into discomfort towards growth goals, towards gulp goals, if you will, where they go gulp when they think about pursuing it, and that asks them to do things that stretches into new skills, where they have to put themselves in over their head on purpose. I love how Ginny Rometty, she's the CEO of IBM, she puts it really, really well. She was speaking to a Fortune magazine's most powerful women's conference, and she said, comfort and growth don't coexist. Basically, if you want to grow, progress, evolve, you've got to be willing to nudge yourself out into discomfort if you're a leader, role model it. And secondly, if you're working with students, if you're working with people that you're in a leadership role, nudge them into discomfort as well, asking them, basically you're preventing complacency and apathy by asking them to stretch towards compelling opportunities that are going to be good for them and good for the school.
Yeah, it reminds me of the zone of proximal development that I learned about back in my college days.
Just a few years ago is in doing my courage work, somebody reminded me of that, and that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, that's
zone
great.
Of proximal development.
Well, Bill, thank you so much. Bill, again, the Chief Encouragement Officer at Great Leap Consulting, his book, Leaders Open Doors. Bill, who's the publisher for that?
So the publisher is ASTD Press.
Perfect.
They can get the book at td.org/open doors. And I hope that they'll give it a look. Leaders Open Doors. You can also go to leadersopendoors.com. But it's great to be with Discovery Education, and I thank you, Scott.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for taking the time today.
Take care.
Take care.